My name is Michał Rachonia. This is Rack On. And we roll in. Our guest tonight knows precisely what is exactly going on in Gaza Strip right now and what is happening with the Jewish community around the world. Michael Freund is a former Deputy Communications Director for Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. He's a columnist for the Jerusalem Post and author, but most importantly, he is the founder and chairman of Shavei Israel, which assists lost tribes and hidden Jewish communities to reconnect with Israel. For his work as Shavei Israel, Michael has received a number of prizes and awards, including the Jerusalem Prize and the Moscowitz Prize. Mr. Freund, also a rabbi and a proud father of 5 sons. Congratulations, 4 of them are serving in elite IDF combat units. Welcome to TVP World. Welcome to Rack On. Great to have you on our program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Mr. Freund, the thing that we are witnessing right now is horrible from various reasons. You are posting online the videos and the pictures of the children that are being kept hostage right now. A 3-year girl is one of them, for 45 days being kept hostage. You are posting online pictures and videos of women, all of which were executed or held hostages. What are the chances of saving those people? Let's start with this question.
Well, today there are news reports that a deal is in the works between Israel and Hamas for the release of at least 50 of the hostages currently being held by Hamas. And that would include 40 children, 40 Israeli children under the age of 18, as well as women who are being held captive in Gaza. Obviously, until the deal is done, it's not done. And that's doubly true in the Middle East. But there seems to be a great deal of optimism that in the coming days, we may start to see some of those children come home to their families in Israel. And it has been a very difficult time for the people of Israel the past month and a half. The massacre that took place on October 7th, of course, as we know, it was the largest mass murder of Jews in a single day since the Holocaust. And it is a traumatic event. And add to that the taking of the hostages, the brutality and the savagery that Hamas perpetrated on children, women, men, even Holocaust survivors, is simply unimaginable. At the same time, though, it has awakened within the Israeli public a sense of unity that we have not seen in a long time. From left to right, there is a consensus that Hamas must be destroyed. That
there is another aspect. I would like to come back to the issue of the Hamas itself and the war in a minute. Before we do so, part of those people being kept hostages are also citizens of United States. And this is also an important issue from the, sorry to say, the geopolitical standpoint, because we are having a major war right now. What is the reason, and how do you understand the reason for which the terrorist organization Hamas decided to take children hostages? It's a barbaric act, but I understand that there is some kind of political or military or terrorist strategy behind it.
You're correct that, in fact, there are citizens of over 30 countries who are being held hostage in Gaza by Hamas. And perhaps for you and I and your viewers, it's hard for us as rational, decent human beings to understand why anyone would take a child as a hostage. It's simply incomprehensible. But that says something about the evil that we face, that to an organization like Hamas, which is dedicated in its charter to destroying the state of Israel and eliminating the Jews of the world, to them, in a sick and twisted way, it makes sense. Now, we cannot begin to understand that kind of thinking, but on a practical level, we have to deal with such people. And the only way...
I assume that that to deal with it, you have to understand the nature, first of all. Otherwise, you are not going to be able, or anyone is not going to be able to take the certain measures if one does not understand the nature of activity that we are seeing, and barbaric activity, no doubt about it. Another aspect of this barbaric activity is building a headquarters, or actually a military infrastructure, in a hospital, and this is the latest news that come from Gaza Strip. But we know that this strategy, that this tactics, terrorist tactics, was as old as the Palestine terrorist movement. I talked to journalists, war reporters who were personally driven by Hamas terrorists in the ambulances within Gaza Strip, while on those ambulances were just the armed members of the Hamas organization. So this is just the way that they wage this terrorist war. How do you fight this kind of things? Those institutions like hospitals, those are just human shields.
You're exactly right. And the problem is even broader than that, because as we know, there was a poll that came out a couple of days ago, a Palestinian poll, which found that 75% of Palestinians support the massacre that took place on October 7th. In other words, the overwhelming majority of Palestinian civilians support Hamas, and knowing full well the atrocities that they committed, are in favor of it. What we're dealing with here is a society much like Nazi Germany, where an entire society has a warped value system which places a greater importance on death than on life. And that is why the Israeli leadership has been so determined to uproot and destroy Hamas, because you cannot, no country in the world could tolerate such a situation where an entity along its borders is controlled by a terrorist organization which has the backing of the majority of the population.
But on the other hand, and this is also a question that is being raised all over the world, we will move to the issues that are going on inside the Western civilization societies right now, very puzzling and lots of questions regarding this. But also the questions that are raised all around the world are the questions about the measures that are taken by Israel to attack Hamas or to retaliate after this attack. And those are also civilian victims on the Palestinian Hamas side, if you call it this way. How would you comment that?
Well, I think it's clear that the Israeli army has taken measures to protect civilians that no other army in the world would take or has taken. The ground incursion into Gaza was delayed. Day after day, warnings were issued to the Palestinians in the northern part of Gaza to leave their homes so that they would not be caught up in a war zone. Leaflets were dropped, phone calls were made, text messages were sent. Israel has done everything it can in a virtually impossible situation to minimize civilian casualties. At the same time, we have to remember, like we've been talking about, Hamas is embedded within the Palestinian population there, both for tactical and strategic reasons. It has cynically used its own people, its own institutions, such as hospitals and schools, and even mosques, as shields, because they know that Israel is humane, and Israel would be less likely to attack such targets. But again, given the nature of what happened on October the 7th, and given the threat that is posed by Hamas, the Israeli military has, on the one hand, taken measures to minimize civilian casualties, but on the other hand, as we know, in any war situation, there are always unfortunate incidents that take place. The difference is that whereas Hamas is seeking to spill as much blood, Israel is trying to limit as much as possible the blood that is spilled.
As we speak, you mentioned the leaflets that are being spread in the northern part of Gaza. Today, as we speak, the same kind of operation of spreading the leaflets in southern Gaza is underway, which means that we are probably close to another phase of this war, which means taking over the southern part of Gaza. But I would like to emphasize on the things that we actually just touched upon. Emmanuel Macron was one of the Western political leaders who referred to those civilian victims on the Palestinian side. But there is a broader context of this, at least in my opinion. We got massive manifestations, anti-Israel manifestations in places where we did not see this kind of manifestations actually ever before, I think. We got France, we got London, we got New York with very puzzling events that are taking place over there, like scrapping and taking away the pictures of the people who are being held hostages by the activists on the streets. What's the reason for this? What do you make of it?
Well, we're seeing the mask drop from many people who claim that they're not really anti-Semitic, they're only anti-Zionist. But the truth is, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. It is the desire of the Jewish people to have a sovereign state of their own, in which they can build and develop their civilization and grow and prosper in freedom. Anyone who chants from the river to the sea is essentially calling for the destruction of the state of Israel and the genocide of the Jews who live within the country. Imagine, for example, if someone were to say to you that they're not anti-Polish, but they don't think that the Polish people should have a state of their own. Would you consider them not to be anti-Polish? Of course they're anti-Polish.
That's obviously the same. The question is, and the thing that puzzles me is that we did not see this kind of obvious acts of supporting terrorist organizations in American academia, for example. When we see the footage recorded by the mobile telephones of students on the campuses of the best universities in the United States, we see it right now. We did not see this kind of things before. We actually do have an overwhelming trend on TikTok with young Americans posting a letter to America, which is written by Osama bin Laden, and that is referring in a way to Palestine in a crude context, of course. But based on what is going on right now, it is becoming a kind of social media wave. Those are some alarming things from the perspective of the Judeo-Christian civilization, Western civilization.
You're absolutely right. It is part of a much larger and dangerous trend of the weakening of the foundations of Western civilization. It is an ongoing attempt by people primarily on the left, or the so-called progressives, to tear down every possible institution that underpins the societies that we have built over the past few centuries. It is a self-loathing of capitalism, of liberty, of freedom, which is given expression in the United States, for example, with people who, well, on the one hand, take advantage of all the great things that America has to offer, nonetheless, hate the country and everything it stands for. And that extends to the Jews as well. That anti-Semitism that we're seeing now, it was always there, but it was sort of below the surface. Now it has become normalized, in effect.
But why? What was the factor? What was the trigger mechanism that caused this eruption? Because it is eruption in a way.
Well, that's a much longer conversation, which goes back to what is known as the woke mindset that has set in among many of the younger generation, particularly here in the United States, which views the world in very simplistic terms of the oppressed and the oppressors. And in many cases, it is a trend. It becomes fashionable for college students to embrace a certain cause, even though they know nothing about it. They know nothing about the history or the nuances or the context. There are videos, I'm sure you may have seen them, of people going to these pro-Palestinian demonstrations where they ask the students, when you chant from the river to the sea, which river are you talking about and which sea are you talking about? They don't even know. They're just repeating a slogan that has become popular. And I just want to add, and we don't yet have evidence of this, but it seems pretty clear that there is someone or some group of people who are behind this, because the extent of these demonstrations, the fact that they are taking place on a global basis, that they are so well organized and well funded, suggests that there is a guiding hand behind it.
I'm glad that you are that you are raising this issue, because it is very hard not to see the Hamas attack on Israel, the war itself, as a front line of a broader war, of a war against what we call in our program a war against the Western civilizations. And from our perspective of people in Central Europe, the Russian aggression against Ukraine in a way is the same front line. The tensions between China and Taiwan could be understood in the same manner as a broader attempt to just to topple the global domination of United States, which is the political order after the Second World War and after the Cold War. We had a lot of accounts of, for example, Russian secret services streamlining or playing the tune of anti-Semitism. We got all other states active in this war with their secret services playing the same tunes. Do I understand it properly that we do have some kind of state actors behind those demonstrations and those social movements?
I think it's pretty clear that that's the case. Again, we don't yet have concrete proof, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. We all know that Russia and China have moved closer. We all know that Iran has tightened its relationship with Russia as well. And the breakout of this conflict in the Middle East has distracted a great deal of attention from the Russian assault on the Ukraine. It's taken, at least in the Western media, you almost never hear about the Ukraine situation now. It's been taken off the table. So it certainly would seem to serve the interests of the Russians and the Chinese too, because China, of course, has been one of Russia's biggest backers, essentially funding the war indirectly. And China also, as well as Russia, came out in support of Hamas, which lends further credence to the idea that this may be part of some larger geopolitical strategy. And the danger to Taiwan, which could face its own devastating situation within the next couple of years, only adds to that concern. So it's possible that whereas the United States right now might be playing checkers, where you think one or two moves ahead, our enemies or our foes in Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, they're busy playing chess.
Michael Freund, thank you very much for your expertise, your thoughts, and your views on what is going on in Israel right now, and in the broader context in U.S. and globally. Thank you very much. Hope that we are going to have a chance to talk again soon.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless you. Thank you.